This is the Candid podcast. Welcome back to the podcast, and thanks for tuning in. This is another episode that's dedicated mostly to the ladies out there. We're going to discuss the difference between your personal worth and your dating market worth. I did a podcast a while ago addressing women and their ridiculous dating standards, and there are many topics from that podcast that I plan on addressing in their own individual podcasts, and this subject is one of them. Back when I was knee-deep in the dating pool, wading through the tons of sea monsters, trying to find at least one gem, there was one singular female war cry that I saw on literally almost every profile. And that is what is now an infamous slogan, which is, "I know what I want, I know what I deserve, and I won't settle for anything less than what I deserve because I know my worth." I can think back and vividly remember all of the left swipes this one single saying forced me to execute, and reflect fondly on my time on dating apps and in dating groups. Yeah, not really. Not really at all. But as with everything else I experienced during that time, it did give me great material for a podcast. But seriously though, this all too common female battle cry is the one that us men hate the absolute most, because it's the one that women cling to the strongest and defend the hardest, even though their view on this topic is completely skewed and totally misguided. And what I mean by this is that women continue to confuse their personal worth with their dating worth. And it's driving us men absolutely mad. Women all across the world are complaining about the fact that there's no good men left as they continue to pass on good man after good man that comes their way simply because they're looking for someone better, due to the fact that they're confusing their worth and qualities as a person with what they are worth in the dating market. And I'm sorry, ladies, but those two things simply are not the same. There are no arguments or debates to be had on this one. Like it or not, but your dating market worth and your personal worth are two completely different things. And I'm about to set the record straight during this podcast. First thing I'm going to do is define and explain the difference between personal worth and dating worth. And then I'm going to give some examples of some things that lower a woman's dating market worth, whether you like it or not, and explain how those have zero effect on her status in society or her individual worth as a person. Now, do I think that any of the women out there are going to listen to me? Of course not. Does some of what I'm going to share apply to men as well? Absolutely. Both sides can benefit from what I'm about to share. But again, this is definitely geared more heavily towards the women, strictly because they're the gender that seems to be the most confused about the difference between having worth as a person and what their dating market worth is. So I think I've laid out my agenda pretty clearly and concisely, so let me get started. I'll begin with giving the definition of any human being's personal worth, and men are included in this as well, so it's not just for the ladies. Your personal worth is exactly that, your worth as an individual person. Almost every single human being walking this planet has the right to seek happiness, be treated with dignity and respect, not be bullied or physically attacked, feel like they matter, and be entitled to the same liberties, perks, and opportunities as everyone else is, regardless of how you may look. Now, I did say almost everyone because some people, such as criminals currently doing time in prison and serving their sentences, don't deserve things like being happy or having the right to the same opportunities that other people have due to these criminals' transgressions. And they have to earn back the right to be able to experience those things in society again, if it's even possible. But otherwise, you get my point. No person walking this earth should be subjected to cruelty or be made to feel less than a person just because they may look a certain way or be in a certain situation in life. I don't care what any other man walking this planet has to say, like some of these fake alpha males out there. I will never personally tell a woman that, for example, just because she's 300 pounds and may be severely overweight, that she has to accept less from a man that does not value her worth as a person. No man or woman should ever have to allow themselves to be subjected to mental, emotional, financial, or physical abuse or lies and infidelity in any relationship under any circumstances. This includes someone who might be overweight, just like I just mentioned. Maybe you're not the most attractive person walking the earth. If you have a bunch of kids, maybe your financial or housing situation is jacked up. You may even be battling a mental illness, etc., etc. None of those things make you less of a person and therefore mean that you should be subjected to being treated like a piece of garbage, period. And I know that there are probably a few less than human people out there who will look at those examples and tell certain people that in your situation, you need to stop being picky and just take what you can get. But again, that's a bunch of BS. The hand that life dealt you or a situation you may be going through at a certain time should never dictate how you deserve to be treated, even if something like being obese or overweight is your fault. We're all human beings and we deserve to be treated with respect. And that includes inside of romantic relationships as well. I really hope everyone gets this, and I don't really think I can make it any more clear. So I'm going to move on. Now that we've defined what someone's personal worth is, let's look at what a person's dating market worth looks like, because that's a completely different story. Again, this is directed mostly towards women, but it does go for both men and women equally. Your dating worth, for lack of a better word, is your value in the dating marketplace, which is completely separate from your value as a person. And this is where women often get it confused. Yes, I 100% agree with you that you do not deserve to be mistreated or abused, and that no matter what you look like, you deserve a quality man if you're a quality woman. However, with that being said, here is where you women get it twisted very badly. Let's just say that you're a woman who's 5'4" tall, 300 pounds, and you have 3 kids. Your friends consider you a great person with a genuinely kind heart. You have an awesome personality. You have all kinds of great qualities and accomplishments in life. You're funny, you're nice, you're caring, you're loving. Yes, you absolutely deserve the exact same kind of man in return. But what you don't deserve is for that man to be wrapped up in a body that's over 6 foot tall with muscles, abs, and childless. You see the difference there? Given some of the factors that I just listed, which I'm going to go in depth on in a bit, your value in the dating marketplace is just not as high as a lot of other women. And you don't command the kind of man you're asking for. And it's frankly quite delusional to think otherwise. That's just the way it goes. All of your accomplishments and awesome personality qualities give you worth as a person. But in the dating market, it just doesn't matter as much, mostly because everybody's expecting to meet somebody like that anyway. They just want it wrapped up in a certain looking package and with certain other qualities that only apply in the dating market. What someone can command in the dating marketplace is based on certain things that you just can't control, such as how your face looks. But unfortunately, that's the way dating works. Both parties must be attracted to each other. And unfortunately, while people who didn't win the genetic lottery can have awesome hearts, they still often struggle to find a romantic partner because of something they can't control. It sucks, but that's just life, and life ain't always fair. However, especially for women, your facial looks are usually the only main factor you get judged by in dating that you can't control. There are many other things such as your weight and other criteria that you can or could have control that make you more or less desirable to the kind of man you're looking to date. Again, these factors or decisions in no way, shape, or form make you any less of a person or less deserving of love. However, they can, and oftentimes do, lower your chances at finding some extremely top tier men. When that happens, it's up to you, the woman, to be realistic with yourself, accurately assess your situation, and lower your dating standards. Yes, I said lower your dating standards to a level that's more realistic with where you're at in life and what you bring to the table in a relationship. This does not include accepting abuse or mistreatment in any form, but this does include taking a long look in the mirror and reframing what the statement, "I know what I want, I know what I deserve, and I won't settle for anything less than I deserve because I know my worth," really means to you. If it means that you've been in a horrible relationship before where your personal worth was degraded and you were made to feel like less of a human, then stick to that statement until you find a man who won't ever do that to you again. But as often is the case with most women, if you look in the mirror and that statement means that you still deserve a man that's 6 foot tall with abs and no kids, even though you're 5'4" tall, 300 pounds, and you have 3 kids, then you're delusional and you're grossly confusing your actual dating worth with a reality that only exists in your head only. Hopefully we're now on the same page, because next I'm going to go through some examples of things that most commonly lower a woman's worth in the dating marketplace and explain the reasons why, because there seems to be some confusion around some of these things as well. The first one that I want to look at is a woman's age. This is obviously one of those criteria that women literally have no control over. We all get old. Again, that's just life. But the problem with most older women is that they still believe that their dating worth is not affected by this, and it absolutely is. Most women just don't want to hear this, but the fact of the matter is that this is true. As women age, their value in the dating marketplace decreases, especially once they reach their 40s and beyond. It's just how it goes. It doesn't make you any less of a person or mean that you're old and dried up. But the fact of the matter is that older men can date younger women much easier than the reverse. As men age and start to get wrinkles, it simply doesn't affect the quality of our looks anywhere near as much as it does for women. I mentioned this in a previous podcast, but there are tons more men in their 50s and 60s that still look phenomenal compared to women in their 50s and 60s. Unfortunately, that's just how nature works. You have to talk to the man upstairs on that one, not us men. We have nothing to do with that at all. Regardless, the fact remains that older men routinely date younger women, while most older women, if they're realistic, almost always end up with a man their same age or older. Part of this reason is something that I mentioned in a previous podcast, and that's the fact that younger women are more desirable for older men that want to start a family but don't have kids yet. Men can have kids until we're literally 100 years old if we live that long, but women only have a finite amount of eggs to have babies with until those eggs are all gone and their baby making days are over. So this naturally gives younger women more worth in the dating market than older women. But even with all these things being true, I still, too often than not, see older women severely misjudge their dating worth based on their age by stating that they only want to date younger men. But unless you're a hot cougar, I'm sorry to say, but the sledding is going to be extremely tough for you. There's just very little incentive for a younger man to date an older woman unless you're literally trying to become a sugar mama, which most of you women aren't, and you shouldn't. So you need to rethink your strategy when it comes to your dating tactics and preferences. Just because you may have a ton of qualities that age is added to your personal worth, that doesn't mean that those things translate over to your dating marketplace worth. Stop overestimating what you're worth in dating simply because friends in your personal life say that you're wise or because you still feel young. Nobody is saying that you're worthless or trying to put you out to pasture. But the fact remains that level setting your expectations in dating and realizing that in your 40s and beyond, your dating pool has shrunk to a few other men in their 40s, but that it's heavily leaning more towards the beyond part of the spectrum. The easier time you're going to have finding the right man for you. I'll move on to the next item on my list, which is that kids, especially young ones, can lower your dating worth as well. This is a very great example of a choice that you decided to make. And it's something that can absolutely increase your personal worth, but unfortunately can severely hurt your dating market worth. This is also a point that kind of goes hand in hand with the age point as well, because the combination of your age plus kids or your age plus the age of your kids can often limit the amount of people who find you desirable in dating. This is, again, especially true for women, but it can apply to men as well. Like I said, kids are not a bad thing, no matter what the circumstances, and having them often increases your personal worth because raising them teaches you so many things about life. It forces you to learn new ways of dealing with things and evolve into a much better overall person. Obviously, kids can also make you want to pull your damn hair out and question everything about life as well. But there's still almost always one of, if not the biggest source of personal development and sense of pride and self-worth in someone's life. However, the potential downside to having kids often pops up when it comes to dating, especially when people refuse to be realistic about how kids affect their value in the dating market. Let's say that you're a woman in her 40s and you have 3 kids that are 7, 5, and 2 years old. You made the decision, for whatever reasons you chose to have kids a bit later in life than most people do, and that's fine. Again, you could be a great mother to your children and be extremely proud of the kids you have and what you've accomplished with them. Simply having kids does not make you any less worthy of love than anyone else. However, in the dating market, Being a woman in your 40s with younger children is going to severely limit the number of men who are looking to date you. Most men in their 40s already have kids in their teens, and they're most likely not going to be interested in helping raise younger kids. It's either that or one of three other things. The man is child-free and he's looking for a younger woman to have kids with, a younger woman who doesn't want kids at all, or an older woman whose kids are ready to be off to college and most likely out of the house for good, also called an empty nest. Of course, there are men in their 40s who have younger kids as well, but almost all of the ones that I know of either don't have young kids or they have no kids at all. So for a woman in her 40s, this is an extremely tough scenario because younger men aren't very likely to want to date her due to her kids' situation, and older men are even less likely to want to date that woman as well. But women who refuse to realize these facts and still continue to operate in the dating world with the attitude that I'm not ashamed of my kids, I know my worth and will not lower my standards, are going to just keep missing out. And it's another classic case of confusing your personal worth as a mother with how men view your worth in the dating market. The same can be said for younger women who have kids as well. Women in their early to mid 20s that have toddlers just aren't viewed as being as desirable for dating as women in their 20s without kids are. And this comes from both older men and men in their 20s as well. The fact of the matter is that very few men want to be a stepdad, especially to very young kids. Men in their 20s will opt for other women in their age range that don't have kids already, and older men will opt for other women in that age range that do not have kids at all. Nobody is saying that your kid was a mistake or that you're a bad person because you had a kid at a young age. And again, that doesn't mean that you have to put up with a man that's going to disrespect you or your child. But the fact remains that your dating worth is going to take a massive hit for a good while if you don't adjust your preferences to match the fact that having a young child in your 20s makes you less desirable to date, especially if you're one of those my kid is my whole world and you'll always come second kind of women. I do understand that this statement is probably more applicable when it comes to very young kids, but the fact remains that it's flat out going to make most men more likely to skip past you in dating, and that's not a reflection on you as a person. Next, we have women's favorite topic, and that's something I've spoken about a few times before as well in other podcasts. This is one that can actually also lower your sense of personal worth as well, depending on the person's mindset at the time, and that's sexual history. Some people like to call it body count, but I don't like that. Let's just call it sexual history. Like it or not, ladies, but in the eyes of most men, a woman with a high partner activity count is just not viewed as valuable for long-term dating as women who've only had a few sexual encounters. I have run into quite a few women in my time who came across as very nice and engaging people. They were honest, cool, and we conversed very well. They weren't, quote, bad people at all, but they were extremely cavalier when it came to sex. And they just didn't believe in limiting their sexual partners for the sake of finding the right man. And that's okay. You got to do you. But the fact remains that the more relationships they have with men, the more they're setting themselves up to be viewed as a woman that's strictly for relations only and not serious dating. In the dating market, men want a woman with as few sexual partners as possible, and that's just how it is. Women are always free to be as sexually liberated as they want to and do what they want with their bodies, but that will never change the fact that a high sexual history is probably the number one deal breaker for a man. And women with higher partner counts lower their dating worth even further every time they add another number to that count. A man would rather date a woman that had sex with the same man 1,000 times than to date a woman that had sex with 5 different men one time. It's just how we are. Now, a lot of men will judge a woman who has a higher number in the sexual activity category because we feel like it's a sign of recklessness, poor decision making, and all around promiscuity. But speaking for myself, at least, I don't consider that woman a bad person or feel that her personal worth as a human being is any less than anyone else's. I absolutely would not date her, and most men wouldn't either. But I'm not going to be shamed into dating her either, because women try to frame opinions like mine up as a personal attack when it isn't. Some women will commonly confuse their personal worth and dating worth by saying everyone has a past and that the past is in the past. We just need to move along and get over it. And while I agree with that to the extent that no, you aren't a bad person or worth less as a human because you've slept with a bunch of men, that still doesn't mean I have to accept a woman like that or that your dating worth isn't affected by your actions either. This is a choice that you made. And although it doesn't make you less deserving of love, it does mean love is going to be a lot harder for you to find because you've devalued yourself in the dating market based on your own actions. Some people have even met adult film stars and said that they were very nice and otherwise normal people, which is great. And I'm sure that they deserve whatever form of love they may be seeking. But any female who is heavily promiscuous is just not going to have anywhere near the same level of dating worth as a woman with few, if any, partners. Sure, the promiscuous women will always be able to find a hookup or a friends with benefits at the drop of a hat, but her dating worth is pretty much gone. And this one is a particularly dangerous one because it can never be reversed. Once the damage is done, it's done. Older women can eventually adjust their standards and start dating older men. Kids grow up and eventually can move out, allowing the mother to recover some of her dating worth and date a bit later on in life. But sexual history cannot change, ever. Once the deed has been done with someone, it's over. That's another notch in your sexual belt. All the born-again virgin talk, ceremonies, and potions you drink will never take back the fact that you had relations with men that add up to the double digits. Women can disagree and fight this one all they want to, but this is something about men that will never, ever change. In the dating market, the more pure a woman is, the more valuable she is. And the more sex partners a woman has had, the less desirable she is to date. Now, I talked about a lot of the reasons why this is the case in the previous podcast, but things like pair bonding, inflated sexual expectations, being compared to other men in bed, and a questionable mental state are just a few among many things that I discussed. Again, in your personal life, you could be a woman who saves stray cats and dogs and helps the elderly cross the street. But if you have a checkered sexual past, it's going to hurt your long-term dating worth, 100% guaranteed. You may not have problems initially matching with or meeting guys, but once you both start discussing who you've been with, and your numbers keep climbing beyond just a few, that man is going to either want to use you just for sex or pass on you altogether. Oh, and one last thing, ladies, I've mentioned this in the past. You're absolutely free to do men the exact same way if their sexual history is too checkered, but most of you all choose not to. So that's on you, not us. My second to last point is one that I've mentioned a few times, and that is that a woman's body shape, body type, and body weight can lower her worth in the dating market. I touched on this at the beginning of the podcast when I stated that just because a woman may be 300 pounds, that doesn't lower her personal worth or make her less deserving of love and affection. Nor does it mean that she should be okay with any form of abuse or cheating. And anyone who thinks the opposite of that is just a disgusting lowlife. It doesn't matter if a woman's weight condition is self-inflicted or if it's a medical condition that is causing the problem. Nobody deserves to be mistreated simply because they're overweight or obese. With that being said, the truth of the matter is that when you look at the dating market, weight always plays a factor in your value. But this one does come with a bit of an asterisk because it's highly dependent on a few factors. The first major factor is you, the woman, and more specifically, your attitude and if you're setting your standards at a realistic level. I also talked about this exact same thing in a previous podcast on women and their dating standards. Being a chunky or overweight woman is naturally going to make it harder for you to find a man. But if you're one of those bigger women that only likes and wants to date fit men, then your dating worth is going straight to the trash. The fact of the matter is that men don't make dating decisions based off of what you like. They make them based off of what they like. And overwhelmingly, fit men date fit women. They don't date chunky or overweight women. Again, as with my previous example on sexual history, a fit man will have sex with an overweight woman if he's going through a dry spell and the woman is willing to get sexually adventurous. But if a fit man is looking for a woman to walk around with in public and call his woman, he's going to be looking for fit women only. If chunkier women look themselves in the mirror, start level setting, and match with the male versions of themselves, then the weight thing doesn't lower your dating market value as much as it does when you remain bullheaded and strictly stick to the fantasy that you're going to land some hot, fit, tall man. And this also goes for bigger guys as well. But the fact of the matter is that there are way more bigger guys willing to date women their same size than the reverse. Because you females have all these ridiculous feminist women falsely telling you that you're the queen and that you can have whatever you want. The fact of the matter is that if chunkier women level set in this area just as much as men did, their dating market value when it comes to their weight wouldn't be as much of an issue at all. The second weight-based factor that could affect someone's dating market value is simply how their weight is distributed. Just like women want a man to have a certain shape, well, men feel the same way. If a chunkier woman is carrying most of her weight in her stomach as opposed to her backside and chest, it's just going to make her less desirable for dating. The same way if a bigger guy has all stomach and no shoulders, arms, and legs. Most women just don't find that type of shape attractive. Of course, I'm not saying that it's impossible for people shaped like this to find someone, just that it, unfortunately, severely lowers your dating market value because it's just not the type of shape most people find universally attractive. And this is especially true if your focus is strictly on dating people outside of your current dating level. Again, for the 55th time, level set your expectations and fix your damn standards. And things like weight become much less of a factor in lowering your dating market worth. My final point is something that can absolutely be controlled, and it's probably the only other point that can effectively lower your personal worth as well. And that's your attitude. Just being honest here, but depending on the type of attitude you walk around daily life with, you may just be a crappy ass person who other people don't want to be around or value much as a person. And I know that may sound harsh, and I completely understand that not everyone is ever going to agree on all life topics, and that certain people are going to take stances on things that others strongly disagree with. But that's not necessarily what I'm talking about here. If you're, for example, a flaming racist or someone who gets off on doing harm to others, then a lot of people don't, and in my opinion shouldn't, see your personal value as being very high at all. You are an actual piece of garbage in life, and you probably need to do something about that. You are less human in my opinion, and you should walk around looking yourself in the mirror and hating what you see. And that should prompt you to go get some help, start making changes, and work on improving yourself as a person so that you can get some respect back, not only from yourself, but from others around you as well. And just like when it comes to your personal worth, a crappy attitude also lowers your dating market worth as well. Once again, I did a podcast talking about women and their attitudes on dating apps. And for those who didn't listen to the podcast, in short, women's attitudes on these apps are a mess. And that's why most men are passing on them. Both men and women seek partners who are friendly and have pleasant attitudes, not someone who comes across as snarky, arrogant, whiny, naggy, negative, shady, or bougie. I personally didn't care how fine a woman looked. When I would read a profile and she would go on a rant talking about how all men suck and that she gets bored easily, so she needs a man that can keep her attention, it was an instant swipe left because her entire attitude sounded terrible. And being honest, if you talk to most men, a woman's attitude and disposition is probably the biggest factor besides sexual history why a man will swipe left on or stop talking to a woman altogether. A lot of y'all women think you're being cute by running your little therapy sessions in your dating profile bios, but it's flushing your dating market worth straight down ye old crapper. So you need to rethink your strategy if you're ever expecting to get some decent results. Like I said, this is one of those topics that can absolutely be a direct reflection on how you are as a person, because your attitude is something that you control, and it's something that is a factor in every single interaction you have with people every single day. So this is probably the one exception where your personal worth and dating worth actually do intersect. And we've reached the end of my list. I'm hoping the examples that I gave drove my point home and that I added some real clarity to this whole dating worth versus personal worth conversation. Except for the very last example that I gave when it comes to a woman's attitude, there's a very clear distinction between things that drive your value as a person in everyday life and what people find valuable when it comes to dating. Some of the factors you can't control, like age, and some of them you can, like sexual history. Either way, as I've stated a few times, life isn't fair. It really isn't. Good things don't always happen to good people. And I don't like that. Frankly, I actually hate it, to be honest with you. But that's just how the cookie crumbles. Even with that being said, the fact remains that just because you're a good person with tons of awesome qualities in your personal life, that doesn't mean you get to make up a bunch of ridiculous and unrealistic criteria for what you're seeking in a partner. The dating world has its own set of criteria that judges your worth as a partner, separate from a lot of the things that make you special in everyday life. So, for the 56th time, your personal worth is not the same thing as your dating worth. So stop confusing the two. Get it? Got it? Good. As always, if you're listening in on YouTube, I appreciate a like, a subscribe, or you leaving a comment. I'm continuing to try to bring you great content, and I hope that you enjoy the kind of podcast that I'm bringing to you. Thanks for listening in. I will catch you on the next one.